What's up guys, Lorelai here, and today I'm recording this very spontaneous video for you, and it's going to be about tulpas. I know this is a very controversial topic, and I was only introduced to a tulpa, like not an actual tulpa, but the concept of tulpas, yesterday. And I've read a blog post from someone who was describing his experience with a tulpa, and the only reason why I stick through the entire article was because the writing style of the author was very interesting, very fascinating. It was obviously a very educated and intelligent writer. So I stick through it just because it was an interesting read. Nonetheless, when I finished reading, I I told myself, okay, that guy was actually describing his experience, how he was talking to his Tulpa, how he was communicating with her, how they were meditating together, and how they were doing things together. So when I finished reading, I was like, okay, so you have schizophrenia and probably multiple personalities disorder. Why tell the world about it? And I think this is a normal reaction from anyone who is not actually familiar with the concept and hearing it for the first time. Moreover, I'm a psychologist, so when I hear someone saying or speaking about hearing voices in his head and that these voices are telling him or her to do something, I'm always like, okay, this is dangerous. We need to stop this before it's too late, because, today this voice can tell you, to start a writing career, but tomorrow that same voice can tell you, to go and kill somebody. And we've seen so many examples throughout the history of people who actually had a voice that told him to do something. So obviously for me as a psychologist, this is like a dangerous thing. Like, if you hear a voice in your head, go get some help, relax, take some time off. But this was my first skeptical reaction, and maybe the person who wrote about it just wrote so emotionally, so he was so devoured by the process that it felt like, someone with a psychological problem is writing that blog post. Nonetheless, when I was thinking about it, like an hour later, I started thinking, what is actually the difference between a tulpa, a spirit guide, an imaginary friend, a double doubler or double doggler. I don't know how do you pronounce that German word, but there is a famous American hypnotologist that is talking about this phenomena a lot. And another thing that occurred to me, and I've never seen anyone talking about this online, is a book from Napoleon Hill. This is the iconic, the most popular book that he has ever written. And in that book, he was talking about a method, a technique he was using, where he was going to a conference, so to speak, with current and former US presidents and some prominent people from the American business industry, and he was consulting them. Now, considering that half of these people were already dead, Napoleon Hill described his experience in vivid details, and he said that at first they were just like talking, and then every character, and you can actually go back, and if you don't have this book at home, you can read it, or you can maybe read it online somewhere. He was talking about this experience where every character has developed traits of their own, like Lincoln has developed a character of always being late. And I remember that when I read that book from Napoleon Hill, I didn't like it. Like the entire book didn't resonate with me. And when I read about that technique, I was like, okay, if the book was bad so far, now it's like not worth reading. He's actually given you many tools to be successful. If you are into personal development, you must have heard about this. And one of the things he's talking about in the end is that that book contains a secret, and if you only implement one of the techniques that is described in that book, you will be successful. And this is, of course, a very controversial topic, because everyone thinks he discovered the secret, and many people on YouTube and on social media are talking about that. I think it was the last chapter when he was talking about writing your goal on a red piece of paper and having it with you at all times and reading it, and that somehow activates the energy of your goal. I tried this. It didn't work. I've tried like writing my goal on a red piece of paper, and I've written it reading it like 100 times a day, nothing happened really. So if you expect magic, I don't think that was the top secret in the book. And then it occurred to me, what if that was the top secret? And again, you may think that I'm crazy actually believing and buying into the whole concept of creating a tulpa and being a host of a tulpa. And I'm not, believe me, I'm extremely skeptical. I'm so skeptical that I even have a hard time believing in God because I'm so skeptical. Like, show me the proof, show me something, like a visible, tangible proof. Nonetheless, I've engaged in many occult and spiritual practices, nothing satanic or black magic, nothing of that nature. More like things you probably never heard about. Anyway, so I'm extremely skeptical, and if someone just comes and tells me about a tulpa and how helpful it is, I just, come on, you can't be serious. It's an imaginary friend. You're lonely. Nonetheless, despite all my skepticism, I just went through all the things I've ever read and heard about that concept, although many people are not calling it a talpa. There are so many people on YouTube. You will find meditation that will help you to summon your spirit guides, for example, or spirit animals that actually can come and help you in some way. So people are believing in seeing or feeling some kind of entity from a different world or a parallel world that can actually come in, join you, and keep you company, and perhaps even advise you something. There are many people who are talking about this, and it's probably safe to assume that so many people cannot be crazy. What was an icebreaker for me was a very famous psychiatrist here in Europe that actually remember when I was a student. I actually read his books. He's that famous, and he was talking about this concept, although he didn't actually call it a talpa. He was calling it I don't know. I don't remember the exact terminology he used for this, but he was basically like creating a copy of yourself that has the desired traits, and then that copy can actually interact with you, talk with you, and advise you. There are two famous psychiatrists talking about this. One is a hypnotologist from the US, and one, like I said, is a psychiatrist from Europe. Both are acclaimed and a verified European database of psychiatrists, and there are only like 30 of them, which are on the top level, like verified worldwide. So I probably think that if someone went that far in their psychiatry and psychology career, they probably know what they are talking about. And of course, they could be crazy, like every psychologist, but they probably know what they are talking about, and it cannot be just an imaginary friend if they actually go ahead and write books about it, exposing themselves to possible mockery for just talking about an imaginary friend. So there must be more to this whole thing. Another thing, if you but again, I'm skeptical, and I'm trying to keep my mind open. I believe that if you have I don't have a talpa, just to clear things up. Maybe I'm not saying that I never will have, or I'm not considering one, but if I ever will go ahead and create one, I know 100% that I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to write blog posts describing my experiences, my little talk with a talpa, because I realize that people are just gonna, offer help and just, say like, okay, you're nearly 40 and you're talking to an imaginary friend. I mean, like, how miserably lonely should you be? Like, can we invite you somewhere? And this is exactly what I'm trying to avoid. I don't want to, become a national laughing stock talking about this. So if you consider creating a talpa, what I can advise you as a psychologist, don't talk about this with anyone, even the closest friend, because there is a very big risk that people are not going to understand. People are going to laugh. They're going to laugh behind your back, and you will not gain anything by sharing your experience. I mean, This is your inner world, and it should stay there. Just keep it there for your own safety and for your own security, because in today's social media world, you risk exposing yourself to needless needless laughter, basically. So I definitely would keep such an experience for myself if I ever decide to create a Tulpa. However, another thing that actually just occurred to me, if you heard of Carl Jung, who is a German psychologist from last century, he had an experience when at some point of his life, if you read his biography, you probably know what I'm talking about. At some point in his life, he just went to, I don't know, he went to some kind of village or to the forest somewhere, deep away from people. He wanted to be alone and to dedicate himself to the experience of alter egos. So he just basically went there by himself and started multiplying his alter egos and just, dividing himself into different small alter egos. And if you know his biography, you probably know that this has ended up really bad for him. He ended up in the psychiatry clinic. Basically, he was just hospitalized with acute psychosis. So, and this is a person we all learn from and we hear. He was very famous with this. He actually connected psychology with the spiritual world, with the alternative reality that many people are claiming to experience. So Carl Jung didn't, Jung, I think Jung, he pronounced it Jung in English. He didn't, do very well with this alter egos experience. And I think if you have psychological problems of any kind, creating a Tulpa on top of your psychological problems is gonna just worsen things. If you're contemplating suicide and you create an alter ego, he's gonna sit there in an armchair telling you to go ahead and jump from the window. This is a bad idea. Just if you have any psychological problems, if you had any in the past, if you have borderline personality disorder, any kind of personality disorder already, creating a Tulpa on top of that personality disorder is going to be a disaster. So I really would recommend considering a Tulpa only for someone who is healthy, so to speak, in the mental sense of the word. I'm going to dig into this whole thing. Again, if it doesn't help, because right now you probably found this video because you were looking for a Tulpa. Actually, you wanted to learn about the Tulpa phenomenon, but the thing is, there are variations of this phenomena, just called differently. You're not going to Google an imaginary friend and how you can get help from an imaginary friend, but you're gonna Google how you can get help from Tulpa. But it's basically the same thing. I mean, like, I personally, again, as a psychologist, don't see any difference between an imaginary friend and a Tulpa. Like, where is the difference? Just tell me. I can slightly see the difference between a Tulpa, which is like 100% your creation, to a spirit guide, which you experience in some kind of meditation, in that image just comes to you. Again, this is something in your head. You created that image, you invited that image, but this is like somehow slightly different. Maybe, okay, I can bite into this. If you want to create a Tulpa, this can help. This can be of use in some cases. It can stimulate you. It can actually encourage you. Which reminds me, if you've seen the movie Gerald's Game on Netflix, I think it was released last year. I didn't like the movie. I didn't like it at all. But that was actually some kind of Tulpa thing. If you remember, the girl was chained to a bed and she didn't know what to do. And at some point, her alter ego just, he was just standing there, and then her dead husband was standing there, and they've all had a conversation, and they were talking. They were, just having conflicting thoughts. And long story short, if you haven't seen the movie, I don't recommend it anyway. So a spoiler is coming up. So her alter ego, that her Tulpa, just told her to, cut her wrist, and so that she would be able to slide her wrist from the handcuffs and get released. So this is basically the concept. You have a Tulpa, like an alternative ego, that is standing near you and telling you what to do and what not to do and is advising you. Now, that alter ego exists only in your head, so she can only advise you things you already know in your subconscious mind, but you are unable to bring to your consciousness. So again, I know I'm totally skeptical, so it's very hard for me, with me, but from my psychological point of view, it's like in my brain, because I have years of experience and I've read things and I know things. Every problem that occurs, I probably have a solution somewhere in my subconscious mind, regardless of if you look at it from a psychological point of view, like it's in your subconscious mind, or if you look at it from a point of view like Carl Jung, like collective consciousness that you can connect to. Either way, the answer is there, but you just cannot go deep enough into yourself and get that answer. But if you create an alter ego, that alter ego, so to speak, can tap into that infinite potential that Deepak Chopra was talking about. Good old Deepak Chopra. So connecting all things together, connecting Deepak Chopra to Napoleon Hill, to famous psychiatrists worldwide, to Carl Jung, and to the recent phenomena of Tulpa, and Stephen King, because he was the writer of the Gerald's Game. Connecting all these things together, we have like a mixture of everything otherworldly, psychologically, insanely, schizophrenically, different motives, different opinions. But here you are. You can just have different opinions about this phenomena. And again, like I said, if you have psychological problems or you had them in the past, I believe that creating a Tulpa could create additional problems, because you will have a hard time getting rid of that Tulpa. That Tulpa may never go away, and she could, develop a personality of her own, so to speak, and
God knows where it will lead.
So be careful with what you're cooking in your head. So I guess this is all I wanted to say about this whole Tulpa phenomena. I'm not saying that I am not considering a Tulpa, just out of curiosity, just to test the waters. Again, I'm not going to speak about it, and I think it takes a certain degree of belief to actually give birth to a Tulpa, which I believe I don't have. Anyway, this is all I wanted to say for now. I'll dig deeper into this thing, and if I'll have more things to say about this subject, I definitely will record a video, and there will be a part 2 of the Tulpa phenomena. So stay tuned.